hear me? Thanks again, Susan. Cool. All right, we're going to start. All right, good evening, guys. How are you doing tonight? Nice. So my name is Mia. I'm one of the co-founder of Product Hub, and Chen here is another co-founder. And we have a crew of our staff. Can you raise your hand if you are one of our Product Hub members? So we have Haimo here and Xiaokun over there. And who else? Xuejing as well. And today is pretty special because I have a special guest. I have Lake Dai here, who is my professor from CMU. And yes, and she will bring a lot of her students here as well. Can you raise your hands if you are from CMU? Yeah. So I guess Chen and I will visit you guys in a few weeks. So I will just give you a short version of what Product Hub is. So Product Hub, we started in last year in July. And we started from a study group, and then a bunch of product managers feel like we want to discuss more about products. So since then, we just do like bi-weekly events. We cover topics from software, like more like software, soft skills, like stakeholder management, or like communication styles, to like the more like hard skills like this one, like metrics. In the speech desk, like this is the first of our series events. We have another one coming up as a workshop, which Haimo probably will provide more information later. And then it's a nonprofit organization. We try to help our members to build their product perspective and global minds. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We have producthub.org information. So like if you are interested in us, you can visit our website. And we also have a Slack channel. I will send the information to the channel, and you can ask me if I can send you the link as well. So if you are interested, you can join our Slack channel. All right, so Haimo.
Sure. All right, thanks. Let's welcome our speakers. All right, so thanks Mia for the introduction for Product Hub. So essentially for today, we are going to do a panel discussion around product metrics specifically. And we are super excited to be able to invite some of the very, very experienced product managers from Netflix, from Google, and also we have Xuejing, who is an entrepreneur. So she can bring additional angle to join this discussion, right? So instead of coming from a bigger company, she can talk about how she actually used metrics to drive making a product decision from a startup co-founder perspective. So really excited. So for the discussion today, we envision to have two separate sessions. In the first session, we're going to focus to answer the why and the what questions, right? So what are the metrics, why metrics are important, and how these people use metrics to drive, making product decisions and to solve some of the practical challenges. Now, in the second session, we're going to focus more on the how question. So how you can use the metrics, how to choose the right metrics, and how to make a decision actually based on those metrics. So those are the two sessions. And after the panel discussion today, we envision to do a follow-up session in 2 weeks. And it's going to be a workshop. It's a hands-on workshop. It's totally optional, right? So if you have bandwidth, after the session today, take the panel discussion as a background context, right? Something you learned, and you can take 2 weeks to do some self-study, to do some learning. We are going to provide some reading materials. Just after the discussion today, come to register, and we are going to create a Slack channel. So you can join the channel, you can discuss with your colleagues, and then we can study together after 2 weeks. So what's going to happen is we are going to split people into different groups, and we are going to give you different topics, and you can have a discussion for about 1.5 hours as a team, and then present your metrics, your results to the audience, and we are going to have our speakers to give you feedback and comments on your topics. So very, very valuable experience. Definitely come to register after the session if you want to attend. So having said that, so why don't we start from the introduction? Maybe each of you can give us introduction about who you are, what is special about you, especially shooting your company. And for Joe, I know you are running a YouTube channel, so maybe you can give us some insights regarding the channel specifically.
Sure. I think I can start. My name is Jane, and I think a lot of people here probably know me a lot. I've been joining Product Pub events for a long time, and then this is the first time that I'm being asked as a panelist. So I'm super excited. And I think there are 2 aspects that I can bring to this table. Is I think the first is that I had a lot of bad examples, a lot of failures before. So I think one thing that we can learn from the failures is very important to most of the people here. The second aspect is because I'm starting the company. I'm starting the company as a co-founder, and so like at the beginning there was no product, no people, no resources, like nothing from scratch. So I can tell you like how to build a product from the scratch and how to find the data where you need and where to find it. Unlike those big companies, we don't have many resources, and so we're going to do a lot of hands-on stuff. So I think those are 2 aspects that I'm going to bring to the discussions and maybe help you guys into with your product decisions or stuff like that. So let me introduce myself. I'm one of the co-founders of Decompose. So for those who don't know Decompose, you can download the app from the App Store. It's essentially a platform where you can help people with visualize your design, visualize your home. So if you purchase a home, take a photo of your room and then drag all furniture scenes to say how they look together. And if you're interested, you can purchase the furniture through the platform. So we've been working on this product for 3 years, and we happily to grow our user base and to have 4 million users right now. And also we just raised 10 million fund. So if any of you want looking for a job, especially for PMs or any of the engineers roles, we have a lot of openings. And so do check our website for openings if you're interested in joining a startup. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joe. I am a product manager at Google. So I've been at Google for a few years. I've been working with multiple products, including advertising, enterprise software, as well as video product. And the major contribution today bring to the table is look at left and right. I think maybe it's gender balance, and also because I'm very big in size, so people call me Big Joe. It's kind of like my nickname in the Bay Area. And then starting like a few years ago, a lot of organization or events, including Product Pub, invited me to give some speeches and sharing, which I'm very interested in. I really enjoy speaking to people, but later on I realized, well, it's actually more interesting to speak to more and more people with my video channel. So I started my YouTube channel a few months ago. And then if you go to YouTube, you search for Big Joe or Big Joe in Silicon Valley, and then you can find my channel. And then back to today's topic in terms of metric, the metric for my a channel is subscribers. So and the reason I always come here and always to speak is every time I have to speak, I go back and check my numbers. Subscribers always go up. So if you have not done it, just do it right now. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Chen Zhen. As Mia mentioned, I'm one of the founders for Product Hub. And obviously, this is not my full-time job. My full-time job, I'm actually a product director at Netflix. My own background is a mix of, I would say, very machine learning related product management and general product management in e-commerce, business intelligence, social network, marketplace, yada yada. One aspect I can bring to this conversation is really how metric is being used in different scenarios. I think some of the scenario probably a lot of you are very familiar with is how you sort of use metric to measure success of your certain product features or product development. That is very common. But there are also other ways of using metric. And from my sort of 10 years of experience across different companies, I've seen how metric is set up to motivate talent, to build teams, to actually segregate a problem into different sections. And the way you do it, how you set up the metric system, sometimes reflect a company's culture and how they approach problems. So we can talk a little bit about that later. And then metric also can be used in kind of other scenarios, not necessarily product development. I also see it being used as a decision-making tool. And when you think of that way, this really can be applied to everything, your daily life as well. And I'm a person very obsessed with making decisions that way. So if we have a chance, we can talk about that aspect too. And the second aspect I would like to sort of come here and share with you all is metric is a very complex kind of like mathematics problem combined with product intuition. So in some way, you can look at this metric from two angles. One is really like what your strategy is, and then that got reflected in how you design and use and measure and read that metric. And then the other aspect is the rigor of sort of statistical learning or mathematics or whatever you call it. And that goes into a lot of the thought of designing the metric, also understanding the metric. So if we do have time to get to that aspect, we would really love to chat, or we probably can cover it in the hands-on workshop. One more thing I want to share is a little bit about a product hub. I think through this kind of a discussion with you all, I personally hope that we can make our sort of mind a little bit more broad and seeing the different sort of perspective, reality of same problem space, right? So today we're very focusing on metric, but this kind of thinking, general philosophy applies to everything. So that is part of the reason why Mia and I are so passionate about this community, because we felt if we just do things alone, you always only see one aspect. But when you discuss your methodology, your problem with a group of people, what you go back with is not just a kind of like a lot of people you know now, or a lot of knowledge you know now, or a lot of cases you know now. Really, it's the broader perspective and capacity your mind is getting. So I hope that is all the value we can bring to you. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it's going to be a smaller group for today, and then for the workshop, it's going to be a much bigger group. You can learn from your your teammates, and you can learn more knowledge. You can share insights. It's going to be a fun experience, I guarantee you. So having said that, maybe let's double click into the panel discussion. For the audience, if you have any questions, we are going to have a Q&A session after the panel topics. So all right, let's double click into the first question. Why? Why metrics are even important, right? So we all know that metrics is all about making a product decision. But given that you guys are very experienced product managers and product people in general, but I'm pretty sure that you guys are not born with that capabilities. So to help us understand the why question, maybe we can start from answering or sharing some experience where you didn't make a product data-driven decision and the decision turned out to be a bad decision, something like that. So we can start from there. So why don't we start from Xuejing, because you mentioned that previously.
Okay. Yeah. So well, at the beginning, we do make a lot of decisions without any data, because essentially, like from the beginning, we just don't have any data, any of the products. So at the beginning, like we decided to just like analyze the problems that we had, and then to decide what problems that we're working on, which is the home furniture shopping experience is really painful for me, at least. So at that time, like I just tour around to like different furniture stores, and I just couldn't imagine like how those furniture pieces would look like in my room. So I think the VR technology is already there. Augmented reality is already there. So and sometimes like at that time we do have some, for example, like Wayfair does have the app and then visualize the furniture in their room. But the thing is that I not only want to buy furniture from Wayfair, I want to buy from different stores, and such as like I want to buy from West Elm. I want to buy this chair from something from some store. So that's where the problem starts. You know, like once we build the product and help people to visualize the furniture from different brands, we don't have the metrics or data to measure that. So it's not turning out to be a bad thing, but it kind of gave us a ground where we can develop in different features, such as like the social features for designers, which is totally different stories. But I think at the beginning, if you don't have the data, just ask yourself like the fundamental questions: what do you want to do? What values do you want to bring to the users? Don't have the data doesn't mean that you can't have a successful metrics or North Star metrics that you want to measure in the future. So I think for this type of questions, I'm just like setting a North Star metrics even without the data is very important for any of the people who are going to design products.
So first of all, at Google is a very data-driven company. So you usually cannot roll out something if the data is not good. So from that perspective, I don't have a story to share when I launch something without data score and it could fail, because you cannot. You have to prove yourself on data-wise, it's kind of like successful, then you can roll out. However, on the planning side, there was a lot of mistakes. You know, I think I made and learned through the all the cycles I can share. So first of all, I can tell one thing. If you go to an interview, right, people ask you how to design the measurement or the success metric for a certain product, and a lot of people will say, well, how about daily active users or the the revenue metrics, right? People ask me this, I would say, I would suggest you to go a little bit more deeper into some specifics other than those like top things like daily active user or revenue, instead of like the particular aspect of that particular product. And this is actually have some reason, because everybody can say my success metric is daily active user, and everybody say our success metric is revenue, which is absolutely right, but it doesn't mean anything. First of all, it doesn't mean that you have put in thought into this. Second, in reality, those metrics are actually very difficult to use. Let me tell you why, because this is kind of a lesson I learned. Oftentimes, daily active user or revenue or this kind of a super high level thing are impacted by so many different aspects of your product. And when we run like experiment or A/B testing, you change a little bit, and then you compare, control, and experiment. By the way, you guys understand what experiment is, right? And then you make those changes, and then realize that you do this, revenue or user or this kind of top line or very high level metric never change, even though it's a perfect metric that doesn't move. And when in terms of doesn't move, I mean, it doesn't mean that the number doesn't move at all. It means that from a statistical perspective, the move is not statistically significant. So we saw the experiment does not converge. And then in that sense, it's moving, but it's not detectable. Meaning that if you use them as a success metric, then you get nothing. It doesn't mean that it's not improving, it's just that you do not detect it. So that's why it's important to, I made those mistakes myself. I used to say, let's just use this very high level, metrics. And at the end of the day, they say, our experiment all failed because it doesn't move anything. It's actually not, it actually does move, but it doesn't detect. So it's important to really find all those. So the goal of setting metric is, first of all, is reflects the product, of course. And second, also it's measurable, detectable, and then you need to look at something that is more easily detectable based on the change that you make to the experiment. So I think that's something I learned throughout the process.
Really good examples. So one thing I want to kind of like resonate with Joe is a lot of the company I worked for before, they all data-driven. So it is hard to find an example that we launch something without having a metric. But what I can share though is kind of like, it's really about the selection of the metric. What you select, what you look at, sometimes it can reveal very crucial information. And then you may think, I have a metric for my product and that's done. But many times, like if you pick the wrong area to look, you may have a metric that goes up, but doesn't mean that you have a success. So here I want to share you a story of a failed product I inherited when I first joined Facebook from Instagram. Facebook was trying to do e-commerce, and then they developed this marketplace tab, which had a sub-tab that is trying to grow B2C. How many of you know B2C? All know? Yes? Okay, all right. So this kind of business to consumer type of activities at the time, we just look at one metric, which is the traffic. How many people visit the tab? And it was growing, but it was also kind of low. So when I first inherited this product, all the solutions of, or product features or roadmap that the team already had was about the traffic. They're trying to drive up the traffic. They're talking about how we can make sure there's more clicks from the main marketplace tab into the secondary tab. But I realized, okay, this is such a sort of new area. Have we looked at, they say just retention? No, we haven't. So I deep dive that retention and look at the funnel. In the end, I find out the retention was only 10%. And 10% is very, very low bar, to be honest, for such a marketplace. And then if this is basically a leaking bucket, right? Like no matter how much traffic I'm gonna roll to this tab, they're not gonna sustain. Very quickly, the people are just gonna be gone. So that's a classic example of like you try to grow a new product, but you only focus on growth and forget your product has a product market fit. So in this case, we didn't have product market fit yet. So the most important thing is for the team to figure out what is the product market fit instead of growing what we have. Hence, we actually pivot the strategy completely. Like instead of growth efforts for this new tab, we're like really asking ourselves, are we in the right market? Do we have the right experience? Do we have the right set of merchants? What was our hypothesis? Is this actually the right approach to, to achieve the goal we have? So this whole metric discussion turned back into the strategy part. As I mentioned earlier, right, this metric always has the two sides, the strategy component and the sort of mathematical component. In this case, like we found the strategy hole in the whole product and then decide to focus on that.
Yeah, it's a very good example. Actually, in my personal experience, I sort of learned that in a hard way. So, when I worked on this product a couple of years ago, we didn't really kind of separate different focus, right? So engagement, growth, monetization, we sort of combine everything together, and we were trying to solve all the problems all together, right? And then realized you really want to split the problems and maybe focus on engagement first, solve that problem, right? Focus on retention and engagement. And then once you verify the retention is good, then you move on to growth, right? Before solving the retention problem, growth number, daily active user doesn't mean a lot. So it's a very good insight. Actually, the next question is for Chen as well. Because you mentioned previously that metrics are not only used to make a product decision, but also can be used in many different aspects, right? Thinking of perhaps from a organization perspective, from a cultural development perspective, from a sort of to maintain a healthy collaboration and everything. So would you mind to share some experience, where metrics can be used to help you in general, in addition to making product decisions?
Yeah, very happy to. This is very dear to my heart topic. So one thing that product manager at a certain stage of your career you might get involved with is actually structure your team. And this could be a problem that your engineering partner facing, because usually they have a way more people, and at a certain point they have to structure their team. It could also be sometimes like because of some reorg that happened out of your control, and now you may end up with two teams with overlapping goals. Or it could be like you start becoming a manager, you need to hire or build a team. Now you need to decide how you divide and conquer your own area. So those things all have gone through. And for those scenarios, naturally, not just you have to think about the problem itself, the problem, right? Like let's say you need to build a social network, right? You have to figure out where you want to put your chips on, how you're going to divide the work. Is it by surface? Or is it by a certain sort of metric, or is it going to be divided by certain function? Like there's many options. So that's like the product aspect. But then also the talent aspect. When you make those decisions, you are affecting people's career, right? So you're affecting their motivation of work. So how you incentivize them matters a lot. And that incentivize kind of equation is closely tied to how you measure their performance. So this is probably more related to companies who are very data-driven, obviously. If you are in a design company or some company don't care about data, maybe this doesn't work. But for the company I have worked for, they are very data-driven. So they always tie employees' performance to certain metric so that they can tell, do you deliver? Right? That's basically the question the manager have to answer in the end. Then all these aspects of the organization come back as a metric problem. So if you can divide your problem space cleanly to sub-problems, and each problem can be measured by a metric, then you can already combine these two aspects together, right? And so you have the way to break down the problem. You also have the way to measure the performance of your team. And they also know what they need to sort of optimize for. Then there are roughly two kind of school of thoughts. One school of thought is like you give each person a different, or each team a different sort of like goal to optimize for. Naturally, it becomes to be different metrics. Facebook is very famous for that. Even you look at the different product org, they each drive a different core metric. But those core metrics multiply together into a final number. The final number is called revenue. So the nice thing of that setup, first of all, obviously you can drive a metric that's sensitive to your impact, right? So that is, good. On the other hand, you are not conflicting with your peers. You basically multiply each other's impact. So hopefully that helps with the collaboration. So that's the kind of the collaborative culture you try to ensure. In another scenario, you can consider like it might be different product area, but they all drive different metrics, and those metrics actually conflict with each other. They become trade-off. Then naturally your org is going to get a lot of attention, because one team want to drive up their metric, they're going to harm the other one. And unfortunately, this scenario is not complete. Sort of like avoidable. For example, if you have an ads and the feed team, these two teams gonna have competing, sort of like contradictory goals that they have to sort of deal with. Another thing I have also seen is actually have a metric for every single team, no matter how you divide conquer the problem. That's the Netflix model. We all have the same core metric, second metric. A nice thing is like deciding product decision can be a joint decision. You can actually take it to almost like a democratic forum. Everyone can debate, and everyone understands how you decide, right? So we're just looking at the metric. If your metric goes up, we all agree. If not, that's the debate. But the hard thing is, by this setup, you can see certain team, it's very easy to drive the metric. For example, my team, I'm very lucky. My team is very easy to drive core metrics. But other teams, they are much more orthogonal to those metrics. They find it really, really hard to be impactful. So there's pros and cons in that case. So I kind of cover this organizational, like structuring and culture aspect altogether.
All right, thank you very much. So the next question is for Joe. So let's double click into a company's mission and metrics, right? So to us, a company like Google, they always have a very high level mission. So to us, this is something that's not achievable in the near future, right? It's more like, up in the air, very far from us. So from a metrics perspective, do you have a or do you think Google's mission can be measured? Is there some sort of a metric that can be related to the company's mission?
So first of all, I think Google is pretty bottom up. So each team raised their own OKRs, and then OKR got bubbled up. So it's more like bottom up instead of top down. So it's like from a mission, but that's not the case. It's more like bottom up thing. However, feel, sometimes Google from their mission or from like top level goal, they have some like directions that each team, usually should follow. For example, one of the things that Google often emphasizes is that we want to build a product that everybody can use, build a product for everyone. And then no matter who you are, no matter where you are, which language you speak, is you a man or woman, or is you white or black or Asian, doesn't matter. They want to have whole world build things for everybody. That oftentimes, this kind of mentality is that we want to organize all the information, we want to build it for everybody. So oftentimes when we measure the success of product, we often use a word called impact. So basically, something is, maybe it's amazing. However, if the impact is kind of small, let's say it's only touch 0.01% of total population, even though the stuff is pretty good, it doesn't seem to have a very high impact. So one important metric, which I also learned throughout working at Google, is it's called coverage. So coverage is a pretty good metric. So instead of saying, or in addition to saying, how good your product is, in addition to that, it's like how many people are using your product. Among all the users, what is coverage that your new feature impact? Because that's kind of like Google's direction that we want everybody to be able to use the product. So that's something I feel like this kind of direction that we kind of pushed from top down. But general OKR is more on direction, it's more like bottom up.
So can I understand coverage as a daily active user divided by the total population?
It's hard to say. It depends on each scenario. But the general idea is that the feature you launch or the product you build needs to be sizable enough that impact a large amount of audience. And not only for one particular set of people, but for all people all over the world.
Okay, got it. Interesting.
For example, usually Google does not build product for one particular country. You think about the whatever search or map or ads. Usually, they want to build it. They start from, I want to build this for the whole 200 countries, right? So if its feature is specific, that only useful for one country, then usually this kind of feature is very hard to be prioritized because the impact level is very, very, very low and coverage is pretty low. And then if you build something that is for everybody, and then because your impact is pretty high, then this kind of product that's kind of like easy to be prioritized.
Although one opposite example is Google Express. It's still only available in US.
I hope that's because you left. If Shane is still with Express, right now probably it's already in all countries.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot. So from a different angle, for Xuejing, right, you work at a startup company and as a co-founder, you are not given a mission. Nobody say, this is a mission that you need to give to the employees. You have to choose whether you can go from bottom up, right? It's to build the culture that people decide what to do, or you can choose to define the mission, define the measurement, and then give it to your company. So what did you do, and something you can share with the audience?
Sure. I think one thing, the most important thing that an entrepreneur should do is when you start a company, you need to think about what do you want to bring to the table. Like a lot of people are just thinking things in a really big way. Like Mark Zuckerberg was thinking I want to bring people closer. I want to change people's life. But fundamentally, I think as a business person, I think every business goal should be making money. That's very kind of from the bottom of the heart and the So I think at least for my mission is trying to make money for the companies. I think that's also true for most of whether it's a big company or it's a small startup. I think the goal should be making money because even if you want to change people's life, but you have to make money in order for you to invest more kind of resources to changing people's life. So making money is a kind of the top level mission for me. And so once I set up the mission, I always do a kind of a chasing down asked myself, like, what can I do to make money, right? So there were some 3 models that I learned. I think the first model is that affection game, so attention game. So whether you're building a business model based on grabbing people's attention. So I think Facebook is definitely playing the attention game, and Netflix is also playing the attention game. So when you play the attention game, the North Star metrics is usually like how many time that the user is spending on your website or on your product. And the second model is the transaction game. So whether you're planning, trying to make people to purchase the stuff through your product, that's the transaction game. Like Wish or Amazon is always playing the transaction game. So the third game is the productivity. So are you creating a tool or a product that help people to improve their productivities? So for example, like Google, like when you do the Google search, you actually get something that you don't know quickly. So that's a tool for most of the people. Once you understand like which game that you're playing, so for example, for us, originally we were setting, okay, we're going to create a tool to help people to easily get their furniture or easily create a dream home dream design for their home. But later on, so that defines how you want to make money, right? So for us, it was like, okay, we help people to use this tool and then help like at least when they purchase something through the platform, through our product, we call it the successful metrics. But later on, we find, okay, so we're trying to improve the productivities, but like, do we really save people's time by building this product? Is the key value we want to measure? But how do you want to measure that? So it's very it's very hard for us to answer that question. And once we have that metrics, and we starting to build the platform, and we're starting to testing with different people, and we get some result back, and there's certain so there depends on different customer segments. So what we have one segment is the designers. So the designers are saying like, we want the social network that we can kind of social with other designers. So we decided to go with the attention game. So that's all like, it's basically the company mission is very top, from the very top is that how do you want to make money? And then the second is that along with your product development, you may kind of shift the product development for a little bit and trying to cover different model. But I think that choose the right model that you want to focus on for different stage is also very important.
Okay.
Can I add a comment? I think just want to point out both Joe's answer and Shujin's answer actually beautifully demonstrate that metric really is a mathematical embodiment of strategy, right? Like the coverage, if you think about Google's strategy, is the scale. You want to tackle the biggest problem that can scale a lot. That is Google's power, Google's the game to play. Not many companies do that. Certainly no startups. And then when Shujin talking about all these different business models, it's really different strategy, right? And then when you choose different strategy, then your metric also change accordingly. So like, hopefully you guys can see that pattern appear in our answers.
Yeah, and also you can see some big companies such as Google, they oftentimes prioritize long-term games over short-term games. This is because they have the luxury, they have the deeper pocket. But for startup, don't listen to them. Okay, you may die next day, or so you do need to realize your gain as soon as possible. But there's just a different strategy, a different stage of the company. And I do think Google is doing really well in this front. Of course, based on the resource they have, they can afford to say, oh, I'm going to focus on something that is long-term kind of gain, which is great for the company. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think that's a pretty good discussion around the why question. Now we all see why metrics are important. let's try to switch gear to focus on the what question. The first one is for Chen. So, we talked about the strategy, the mission, those high-level stuff, right? The daily active users, right? The money, the monetization, everything. But those are the goals, right? The success measurement. And we all know that, well, from a day-to-day life, a daily basis, we deal with actionable metrics more often. So can you give us a definition for actionable metrics, and how are these actionable metrics can be related to the success measurement, to the bigger goal, to the key metric?
That's a good question. I think a metric has many different hierarchical structure. And often we think a good metric should be actionable by its default. So I would position this with a different analogy here. Think about you're a product designer, and then you have a problem you try to solve, right? And often the methodology is you think about the problem, and you think about the solution you want to use to solve the problem, and then you start with some principles. There's going to be some guidelines, principles that are going to constrain this vast majority of different possibility into a few. That's how usually product design works. I will use the same process to the metric design. It's very similar. It's like you have a problem, which could be the goal or something you want to achieve. And then you have a solution. You propose a certain solution that should help you achieve that goal. With that in mind, you still need to apply a set of principles. So those principles can guide you to finding that golden metric to achieve that measurement task. So some general principles we use, for example, actionable is a principle, right? If a metric does not adjust based on your action, then it's not achieving the measurement perspective, right? And then the second piece is also you usually want a metric that is not very gameable. Because if you have a metric always goes up, no matter what you do, that's not a good metric, because then you can't differentiate. So in some way, you can call this second principle as differentiation. And the third, you also want a metric is a kind of a general enough that can measure the differences in different scenario. You don't want a metric that only sensitive to certain scenario and not sensitive to the other areas. And I can go on this list because it's a very company dependent, product dependent set of rules. There's some common rules that I mentioned at this rate, but there are other rules, right? I sort of cover in only a conversation. Some company will prefer the metric is marked applicable, like Facebook. That is actually one of the principles when you design your metric system. You don't want to design something that is conflicting with each other. But for some company like Netflix, we want to design a metric that feel like general enough, easy to understand enough that everyone in the company can relate to. So that two principle you can see is already different, right? And depends on your culture, depends on setup, but that can be different. Now let's review this principle, come back to the first principle, actionable. What does that mean? Actionable very much honed down into a few aspects. One aspect is this sensitivity. You want to make sure your metric is something you run experiment. Let's say this is all about time cost, right? If you're a big company, you may be able to afford running an experiment more than months. Like that's Netflix. But in a company that's very fast paced like Facebook or startup, you probably want your experiment to tell you something within a week, 2 weeks, or even a few days. Then depends on your time cost that you can afford. When you design your metric, you need to reflect that. So again, sensitivity, I view it as a very company-dependent, scenario-dependent element. So I'll give you a very concrete example. I mentioned the retention already, right? Retention measures how many users retains after a certain amount of time. And as you can see, this metric is not very sensitive, right? Sometimes it takes months or even half year, depending on how long you want to measure the retention to see the difference. So if you choose retention as your metric, then most of your experiment is not going to move the needle. But let's say time span, that's another one that Shijing mentioned about attention model-based businesses, right? That's a super sensitive metric. Almost anything you run should affect it. So that's why in many companies like Facebook, they can be fast-paced. They're fast-paced, obviously somewhat related to the founder's personality and in their business, but very also is related to their problem space. Because they are in a game of time spent, and that's such a sensitive game, that's why they are able to run experiment very quickly. And the bigger they are, the faster they can run experiment, and they can afford to run many, many different kinds of experiments. So I hope you see the connection here, the sensitivity, very, very related to their strategy, the game, the product they are working with. So designing the metric, when you think about it, is really about how you envision your future efforts. Like for product manager, that's one of the common questions we'll ask. And this question is what we use to gauge someone's execution capability. That's what we say. So it's not really just a mathematical question. I'm not really interested in how good your math is. I mean, you should be decent in some sense, but you don't have to be a mathematician to be a good product manager. Really, through this question, I'm trying to think and judge you, see, do you have a set of action in your mind? And through that set of action, you can see the inner connection between your action and the final results. And through that, can you detect some of the variability, sensitivity of your metric so that you know whether that metric is good or not. If a good candidate can break down the metric in that way, even with the answer to my question could be, what is your metric to measure your success, right? But instead of you just tell me what metric you do, you will tell me something, oh, if I do this type of efforts, this measure go this way. If I do this type of effort, this measure go that way. Hence, I will adjust this metric to be this. All right, you are a very, very excellent product manager. So there's a lot of subtlety in this definition.
All right, thank you so much for sharing the insights. So the next question is for Xuejing. You mentioned this previously that unlike Google and Facebook and Netflix, these guys, they have a lot of data. Well, for you, the practical situation is you don't have a lot of data, but still you want to define some kind of metric, right? To know that you are moving towards the correct direction with whatever data you have. So do you mind sharing some experience, to the audience when you don't have a lot of data, but you still somehow come up with a measurement to go down the right direction?
Sure. One example that I can share is that there was one time that we want to improve the snap rate. So at the beginning, our snap rate is very low. It was like 10%. So how do we want to compare to the other lifestyle apps, and how do we want to improve that? So it's our goal, and why we set up the metrics. It's usually like one kind of simulation that I run in my head is determining okay, snap rate is going to be my metrics and to measure, and so why do I want to measure that? So if I can improve my snap rate, it was like a chance kind of example. If I want to improve my snap rate, so I can bring more, I can bring more people to my app. If they're inactive, I can send emails, I can send notifications into them, so to bring them back. So snap rate is very important to our kind of business goal. So once we bring them to the board, and because they are signing up with the emails or with the Facebook account, so their retention rate is really high. And even though their retention is low, we can have certain points because we have their Facebook account or we have their emails, so we can bring them back. So so we can push the retention rate high. Once we have the retention rate high, we can if we're playing the transaction game, we can push the transactions to be higher or conversions to be higher. So in that way, we can make money in the end. So it was like a logical chain where you can kind of prove yourself from a very kind of small mission goal and to be the end goal where your business goal is. So if you can prove that logic chain to end up to the end goal, congratulations, you basically make the right choice of choosing the right metrics. So back to the example that I was given, because at that time we were trying to improve the snap rate. So we set up the metrics, but how do we don't have data to prove that. And all the data that we get is that, okay, the retention rate, okay, the sample rate is really low. So how do you want to do and to improve your retention rate? How do you want to do to improve your sample rate? So I think the first thing that we do is we just search different competitors like sample page and try to say like whether there's certain UIs or UX we want to improve, or we can improve and to bring the sample rate back. But no matter what we do, we just couldn't bring that into a certain, to be a significant number. I think the best number we can achieve is 50%. But still very low compared to the other apps that are around the lifestyle category. So the other thing that we do is when you don't have the data to support you, you just do the user testing. So through the user interview, we just bring a lot of new users into our app, into our office, and we do the user interview. So during the interview, we observe that most of the users, because at that time, so the backstory is that when we design a sample rate, we put the sample rate to be a certain page where we want a user to try our app first before we ask the app. At that time, it was very practical philosophy, and a lot of apps actually follow that rule. So we just follow that rule. But we found like after user try our app, they got really frustrated when the sample page popped. So we asked them why, and they were saying, okay, why don't you just ask me to sign up at first place? And in that way, I can enjoy the app for free, like without the hassles of doing this app anymore. So we were kind of like hesitant because it's a little bit counterintuitive. And what we do is that we carried on A/B testing. So that's the next thing that we want you to do. I learned from my experience is that first, if you don't have the data to support, first do the user interview, trying to observe like what people do, why they don't sample, or why they don't perform any actions that you want them to perform. And the second thing is that if you have the capability or if you have the resources in trying to carry on A/B testing, because at that time we were very hesitated. We just afraid like if we put the sample rate on the first page, it's going to decrease our daily active users or retention rate, because people they don't really want to sample with a strange app like with their emails or Facebook account. So to validate that, we did A/B testing, and it turns out once we put the sample rate on the first page, the sample rate got popped up to 50%. So it's a huge improvement. So to summarize, basically, you can do like a little bit of exercise on basically link your like practical or small metrics with the company missions, which is the making money, or whatever game that you're playing. Once you don't have when you don't have the data to support, I think first thing is to champion with the user interview or user testing. I think that will tell you some kind of inside information. And then do the A/B testing as much as possible.
Yeah, so thank you so much. We all see that being a co-founder is not an easy job. So on one side, you have to be very precise logically, but on the other side of the spectrum, you have to work with what you have, right? You have to combine qualitative analysis with quantitative analysis to an extent. Unlike, these guys, they have all the data they have.
We still have to do core one time.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Question.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So earlier when you said we were looking at the sign-up rate, initially it was 10%, and maybe in this particular case it's really low and you want to improve it. But I'm wondering, like in general, as a product manager, how do you know if a rate is right now it's pretty low? Like, do you just know? Do you have your expectation? It should be 50% or 40%. How do you have that kind of concept?
Yeah, so there is a bunch of so first I think you as a product manager, I think you probably have a lot of metrics or a lot of data to look at, and you like don't like the, well, I haven't worked in a big company before, so I don't know what's the big company looks like. But for a small startup, once you don't have the data to compare with, just search online to say like what is the average snap rate is for that particular category. For example, we searched lifestyle categories and the average is like 30% or 40%. So you know, like at least you need to do to reach to that level. So I think digital marketing search on the internet is definitely helps with you to find a reference. So the other thing is if you can't find a reference to point with, just ask around and to say like what other companies are doing. For example, like I have some startup friends and just ask them what is their snap rate, even though it's not the same categories, but it can give you some kind of some data into reference with.
Yeah, so this is actually a general technical question. So how do we understand data number, right? So in my opinion, the understanding of number is coming from one thing, which is comparison. Otherwise, you do not have any insight. However, the problem is what you compare with, right? So then there were multiple angles. For example, you can compare with market average. You can compare with competitor. You can compare with other product with the same company. You can compare with yourself. For example, you can look at the trend of this metric. Is it trending down? Then you are in trouble, right? Or you can compare with a certain amount of time that in the past, let's say Q4 versus Q3, or Q4 versus Q4 last year, when they have a comparison kind of benchmark. So those are all the all the areas that you can compare to. So single number doesn't tell a story, but comparison tells a story, and you compare with others, compare with yourself.
I want to add a different perspective. I think these are all true. Like a lot of time you do benchmarking, you do kind of history, time series to get an understanding of the relativity of the number. Very often you also need to do it from the first principle. I'm trying to really ask the question, ultimately any of the business, there's like input, there's output. There's a cost, there's a return, right? In order to make the business viable, you can actually calculate through those different numbers how much money you have to put in to generate one transaction, let's say, or generate a certain time spent. And then your leaking bucket or the percentage ratio or sign-up rate basically directly relate to your operational cost. And
it doesn't cover your
let's say you spend $10 on a person, and then there's only 1% of chance that person actually convert to your customer. Then really your cost of converting that person is $10 times 100. That's $1,000 per person to acquire that customer. And then you can think about like how much you can milk out of this person for their lifetime on your product. If that value is only $100, you're definitely in the leaking bucket business, right? So in that sense, it doesn't matter how your competitor do. You have to increase your conversion from 1% to at least to 10%. Then you maybe break even. And if you go to 20%, now you're making money, right? So a lot of this is basically they call it unit economy. And this is something like if the folks who are in Alibaba, in like e-commerce business, like very familiar with. Because it's all about unit economy, like how you can think about unit in terms of a product, or in terms of a subscription, or in terms of a person, or sometimes an ads. And you just calculate the unit economy and see is that break even or is it making money? And a lot of your potential goals is just determined that way. Because if you don't have that ratio, you are down.
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. We can keep the rest to the end. We have a Q&A session. Let's just run through the panel discussion first. So the next question is for Joe. We know that product managers are the owners of metrics, but also we have an engineering team. They also work on metrics, and data scientists, right? They work on all sorts of data points and metrics. Now, from a product manager perspective, how would you define the boundaries between what needs to be owned by a PM versus engineer and data scientists, and what is a healthy collaboration model from a metrics perspective?
How many of you are PMs? How many of you are engineers? Some. How many of you are data scientists? Okay.
They're gonna increase your answer.
No, it's an interesting ratio. Because in general, I think we should have, in the team, you have more engineers than PM and data scientists. I think the ratio between engineer and data scientists is pretty reasonable today. But the PMs are over-indexed. Anyway, but so then you guys probably have worked with each other before, and then in theory, in the theoretical world, PM are the ones that own the metric. That's what I would define what success is, and then I will motivate or drive the team, cross-functional team, including engineers, designers, as well as data scientists, and then run experiment, getting result, and then circle back the whole thing, right? And the engineers are more responsible for implementing the changes and then give technical advice. For example, one thing they can say is, well, this, the way you design or we design this experiment is actually too difficult to implement. It could cost us like 2 quarters to do that. Or we can do it in a different way, which will give us data faster. Then those kind of advice is pretty good for us to make decisions. Say, oh, should we go this way or should we go that way? What a trade-off we want to make, right? And data scientists are the ones that we often go to for statistic questions or some really questions that we do not have an answer for. By the way, in my view, data scientists are very valuable because oftentimes they are not the one that to execute a task. They're often the one that answer my question. I'm not saying, oh, please look at this number for me. I usually go and say, I don't understand. Tell me why. And it's a very open-ended question. And those people like magically come back. Here's all like the analysis we did and all the statistics we did. I was like, wow, this is like super. So I used to work in many teams. One thing I used to work with is only engineer plus PM. I also have a team work with PM plus engineer plus BA. But BA doesn't do those things. BA usually just do queries. Please run this query for me, right? But I also work with PM plus engineer plus DS. I feel like in heaven, this is so good. This is like, the engineer will tell technical aspect, the data science tell you all this like insights, and PM, I'm just the only thing I feel like I'm going to lose my job, because those are so good, However, so that's like in theory. In practice, actually, in my opinion, everybody is actually so good at the whole picture, which is also a very good thing. Like many PMs actually know a lot about engineering. They have engineering background. They know how to implement. They have some basic ideas, the implementation trade-offs. Many PMs also know statistics very well. Believe it or not, many of them are like statistic experts. Some engineers are very good at statistics as well. Sometimes they don't have to talk to scientists because they already have some of insight into this. Some of the engineers also can give very good product insights. Believe it or not, many engineers I work with they really know business. They really know business. They do not only do the engineering, they really know the business. And I really kind of like the whole collaboration. It's so good that oftentimes PM just make a proposal out there and say, oh, here's what I think. Here's a metric. How we implement it and how we analyze it. And then engineers and data scientists can give opinions onto this. And they actually have, their thinking is not, I'm not an engineer, I'm only a data scientist. They also own the whole thing, which is great. So in that case, it's more like very collaborative way of working together. And then, everybody can, put together their thoughts into the whole process and make sure from beginning to the end, everything is well planned and well executed. I have many instances that working so well with engineers and data scientists, and from beginning to the end, and went so smoothly, and the result was so good. So I think that's kind of thing I personally enjoy a lot.
Okay, thank you so much. So that's sort of enough said for the what perspective. Let's dive into answering the how question to get hands-on to address some technical problems. So the first question, it's mostly for Joe and Chen. Usually bigger companies like Google and Facebook and Netflix, they have this like one mission, but they have multiple products. It's more like a matrix of products. All of these are different products. We briefly touched on this topic previously, right? So we have this one mission and we have success measurement for each product, and we can multiply these numbers and we can achieve our goal. But from a practical perspective, how do you break it down to the product level success measurement? Right? So for example, at Facebook, there's Instagram, there's WhatsApp, there's Messenger, then there's a Facebook. Now, how do you know what is a success for Messenger? If I have 100 million users, is that a success? or 1 million user or 10 billion user? So how do we define a success for a product, given that only we multiply these numbers, we get the final result? How do you see that?
I can quickly talk about this. I think this is more like a CEO level question, so I wish I got paid that much to answer this one. Yeah. However, I think you're actually asking about how a company should be structured. For example, like Instagram and Facebook are like subdivisions of a company, right? And in some companies, they actually product-wise actually are merged together, and monetization is a completely separate team that also monetize all the products, right? So those are like more like organization, and organizations often change. All of reorgs and putting different teams all together. So that's all the case. I think the challenging or the most important part here is how do you decompose your business model? Some of the business model are pretty, can be decomposed in a very scalable way. For example, if it's anything that relates to advertising, right? And then advertising usually is you have to have organic traffic, and then convert some of the traffic into money by ads. And then in those kind of companies or the kind of business such as search ads, display ads, social ads, right? And then you can have a traffic metric, and then you can have a advertising monetization metric. Then the team working on the traffic, they only how can I generate more traffic, kind of people coming to us, daily active user, daily page view, engagement, etc. And then the other side is like, okay, how can I turn all this user into money, right? And then what is CTR of the ads, what the ad load looks like, what is conversion rate from click ad to end conversion, right? Things like that. So those are the things that only the advertising or the monetization team will care about. Right? So that is because of this business model. Some business models are harder to decompose. For example, the like enterprise software, right? You are selling a enterprise software to businesses. That is not a kind of thing. Only this team is working on traffic. This is working on monetization. It's the same thing. The whole thing. You are selling a paid product. So then it depends on what kind of product you're offering and what kind of is it easy to decompose or not. I think that's my observation.
Actually, could you talk more about that? So let's use some business software, or you're selling some sort of enterprise API, some package or something like that. And you have big customers that you're winning. Or what types of metrics would you use to make sure you're winning or growing versus your competition? Let's say you have 3 competitors and they're all making similar stuff. How do you figure out what the right metrics to drive?
Yeah, so this is an SVP level question. But I'm happy to take a step on this. I think the issue is where it will, at what stage your company is at, and then what is your strategy amount of time. For example, for enterprise software, right? Some of them are in the stage of scale, getting a scale, right? Then for them, the number of users, number of customers, right? It's very important. Let's say you have like 100 customers that buy your software. That is a good thing, right? Some other companies actually are over that stage. Their stage is how can I make more money? And in that case, number of customers is not important because some companies are larger than the others. If you are enterprise software, usually you are charged by number of seats. For example, your company have 1,000 employees. That company have 10 employees. And then the company have 1,000 employees give you more money because each time you are charged by number of seats you charge. Then you will measure how many total seats you actually sell. That is more like the revenue kind of thing. And some companies are even like earlier stage of enterprise software. Let's say my goal is to survive. We are the first year or something, right? And then your thing is not the number of seats, not the number of customers, but to get some famous companies to be your customer list. That's some like logos, like you have, for example, you have the top 100 company, maybe 20 of them become your customer. No matter how many seats they buy, as long as they're a customer, you can put that onto your website. Coca-Cola is my customer, McDonald's is my customer. They are like top company. Then it helps you to put you into the next stage of the development cycle. So my thinking is that depends on where you are for enterprise in particular, and then you can define it is like just logos, or it's like number of customers or number of seats, or maybe later on you can become, I'm already very scalable. Then my next goal is to upsell for each seat. I want to upsell to much higher revenue. For example, now I charge $10 per each seat. And in the future, I want to charge $15 for each seat. How can I do that? And you can make different offerings, change your tiers. That will be a different stage of your enterprise offering.
So just see if I understand it.
Yeah.
I think your first sentence already answered my question. Basically, it's not a product management question, right? You're basically all the examples you gave. They're all sales.
Can I give some other perspective here?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think Haimo's question certainly can apply to the company level organizational structure. That's kind of what we mentioned earlier as a use case for metrics. But it's also a methodology, a strategy question for product level decisions. I don't think that this is only applicable on structural. So I'll give you a very vivid example. Let's say you do have a problem that is growing your new product, you are an entrepreneur, or you are a PM of a new product, right? Ultimately, what you care about is this product meets the market need. How do you measure success, right? A lot of you are probably very familiar with this AARR model. That is a famous growth sort of framework. I think a potential may come from Facebook because that's how they sort of invent that framework. Facebook is very good at breaking down problems into sub-problems. And then for each sub-problem, assign a particular metric. Then you basically have a set of product areas you can optimize for. So if you're a product manager, you say, I need to have 5 priorities this year. And this is corresponding to each funnel. Then you literally, each metric represents one strategic area that you're going to invest your time for. Right, so AARR in the sense is like, you try to acquire people, that's the first step. Second step is activate them, make them active. And then the third step, you actually make them retain, stay with you. And the fourth step, you make them actually pay money with you. That's called revenue. And lastly, you make them your champion, right? So all this is one framework you can break down a product. And then sometimes the product manager themselves can come up with their own framework for the certain perspective. For example, for my product area at the time when I was working on Instagram feed, we're trying to think about how we can do ranking to drive the sharing. So it sounds a very hard problem because usually if we do feed ranking, I don't know how many of you have done this, it's really about driving time spent, right? And we come back to the earlier example about attention model. Then we try to drive sharing here. It's not time spent. That's much, much harder. And the reason why we think we can drive sharing, which is like how much content a creator can make to our service, it's a marketplace, right? So people who create the content and the people who consume. Same with YouTube. A lot of current social networks is like that model. We are thinking about it's just through feedback. So at the feed PM, I'm trying to break down my area. I had at the time like 30 engineers. Like I'm not gonna assign them the same initiative. Just drive sharing. That seems like so what, right? So sharing is the goal. I need sub-strategy to help me get there. I think strategy is a very key part of product management. Like everyone, like I hope when you're thinking about things, it's all very strategic. Strategy is the past from current position to the future position. So in this case, I divide them into 3 areas. One is just trying to increase how much of the inventory should be there for me to rank them. And the second step, I need to rank them so well so that the time spent goes up. The third step, I need to make the time spent translate into engagement in terms of like. Because the like is the feedback the author needs, so they feel happy, so they will produce more. So literally, I break them down to 3 sub-areas, and each team is working on each particular area. And each particular area, they have their own metric to drive. So in this case, like I'm not a CEO, but I guess you can call me the CEO of the feed, right? And I need to break down them into sub-areas so that team have a very specific, a particular asset to drive. And this also represents beautifully my strategy. So when I present to the company, this is how I tackle the problem. Here are the 3 bullet points I need to tackle, and these are the 3 metrics beautifully aligned with them. But ultimately, this whole team has a one core metric, right? Has a one North Star, it's still sharing, and sharing is not a sensitive metric to drive. So this is another aspect to the earlier question about what is actionable. So sometimes your action depends on space, right? Sharing is actionable in half year, but not actionable in months. So I break down to 3 actionable metrics that can drive in the month scale or even week scale.
So one thing I've been thinking, the question that you raised, are the strategy of tracing is like more scalable for enterprise users or less scalable for users? Is that a sales kind of thing or the PM kind of thing? This is a VP level question, but I think it is a sales level thing, but it's also a product level thing from enterprise, because when your enterprise product try to scale to many like seats or many users, then you have to think about how you can standardize your product offering, right? You cannot say, oh, streaming company, I'm going to buy this, I will customize something swift for you. You cannot do that because you're just not able to afford that. When you are at the very beginning, you are creating all credibility, and you have a large customer going there. Then you will say, I can do anything for you, And then in that case, you don't think about understandability. You just say, I just want to get this customer, put that on logo of on a website, that kind of credibility, right? So that also changes how you think about your product, and you can have like a highly customizable or medium-sized customizable. For example, you have component or modules, or completely standardized SaaS option that is coming and buy. It depends on how scale that your company is at a stage of. So I think that it's both both a sales issue and a product issue.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think this might be a piece of career advice. Not necessarily everyone will agree, but through my own personal experience, is like no problem is too small, too big for a product manager, as long as that affects your product success. So sometimes you may think this is a sales problem, but like Joe said, it could very well be the problem that you have to solve in order to make the product successful. So yes, it may not be in your job description, but you would have to still think about and figure out and influence. And only if that then you can grow as a leader. Because ultimately, all product managers, no matter how junior level you are a product leader. So in some way, you are owning a certain piece of the meal that, right, you should feel like empowered to drive. And certain decision may be like above your pay grade. Like we were joking about, but it is true, right? A lot of the decisions are above our pay grade and above our control, but you would have to learn to figure out how to implement them. And the earlier you start learning that game, the more successful you as an individual will grow. And in many cases, you will fail, for sure, right? Like because especially when you're a big company, even we have the desire to change it to implement, you will fail. But you have to persist, you have to keep trying. One thing that I learned from Google is like the way to get promoted is perform as if you are promoted. And that's so true for your life too. If you want to be successful, you have to act as if you're already successful. So if you want to be a SVP or CEO, you have to act like a SVP or CEO, even you are not. And if you get to that level, one, you will be a much better employee. Why? Because you connect with your, basically your bosses, and the bosses and the boss. You know what they are worrying about. So you can be much more effective in serving them, and they will like you a lot. On the other hand, you're also much more likely to align with the overall business goal, overall company goal, make you less selfish, and make your team less selfish. And in the long run, this helps everyone. Everything you care about, yourself, your team, your boss, your career, your company, your product, everything benefits from that thinking. So just, I didn't think that way in the beginning, but very, I think just recently, maybe recent few years, I started realizing this is actually the game everyone should play.
Thank you. So in the future, I will not shy away from asking questions.
Exactly.
And also in my video a few weeks ago, you have not checked my video. Big Joe is Silicon Valley on YouTube. I talk about some sad parts of being a product manager. One sad part is that you are the owner of every single thing. And if you do not like it, don't be a product manager, because it is true. And your work does not have a boundary. Some people have a boundary in my work, that I'm designer, so I'm doing designs, right? And analysis is not my job or something like that, right? But PM does not have a boundary. So you really own every single thing. So that's one of the sad part. If you don't like it, don't be a PM. Yeah.
If you like it, this is really nice life.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's move on to the next topic. It's about pros and cons. So essentially, usually when you do a feature, there's a bunch of metrics to consider. And usually, very oftentimes, when you do an A/B testing, right? Feature A, some metrics are going up, but the other metrics are going down. So for example, if I focus on engagement, maybe my retention is going up. I'm able to reach to a broader audience, but in the same time, my conversion is going down. right? And maybe you have a different feature that drives these metrics completely differently. Maybe conversion is going up, but retention and engagement is going down, or maybe a different set of metrics, right? So in that case, when you have two features to compare, you only have enough people to make one happen. How would you compare the pros and cons, and how would you make that decision? Maybe you can start from Xuening.
Yeah, sure. I think it's again back to the point that I made before. So whenever you have metrics, just to think about long term, just to think about the big picture, high level thing. What do you want to achieve? For example, like I can give you an example of where we have this in-app purchase, and so we want to improve the app purchase like revenue, and so we just analyze the funnels and try to see like which stage that user are taking actions, and then later on we find the conversion rate is really low, and so we want to improve the conversions, but at each stage, so at each funnel, we just we have a metric to basically measure how many users are actually reaching that, and how many users are performing actions and turning into the next funnel. So in the end, after we do a lot of improvements, a lot of stuff, we do find like at each funnel the users does increase, but just at the end the conversion rate is still low. The conversion rate means that the users purchase the service divided by the total number of the users adding to the funnel. So if you increase the denominators and which is the users coming into the funnel, and you definitely reduce the conversion rate, which is kind of the truth. But it's just determining like it just basically so how to say that? So even though you decrease the conversion rate, but like a lot of efforts that you made before is not waste. You just increase the people who enter the funnel, which is still going to help with the end business goal, which is that the ultimate goal is trying to make money, right? So you need to figure out like why at the last step that user converted low. So it doesn't mean like the previous work that you did is the waste. You just need to focus on the last part. It just helps you to basically analyze the part that you need to fix. So that's that's what we like.
So first of all, I think when we define, or at least myself, define metrics, we have a target metric to move. But also, usually that's not the only metric. We should also define what kind of metric you should not move or should not decline. And that's actually pretty important. Because sometimes you don't want to say, oh, I moved this particular metric by 20%, but our revenue dropped by 80%. And then I all got fired immediately, Yeah. So you have to tell something, say, okay, I'm going to move this metric by, let's say, up by, let's say, 1%, for example. And then revenue should at least keep neutral, and daily users should at least keep neutral. So that's usually how the same. Otherwise, you should be really paying attention. Usually there's like a red line you do not cross. Of course, it depends on company. For example, like number of users, number of revenue. Some companies use happiness, right? For example, some company will do this. Someone can screw up the user and say, do this, your revenue up by 20%, and the user happiness down by 20%, right? And then usually this doesn't happen in many companies because it's really bad. You are screwing up your users. By the way, this is something that PM should play a very, very important role, because PM should define this how to say. Let's say if you just define one single metric in a large organization or in an organization, a lot of people can abuse it. They can say, oh, we want to increase revenue so that we can promote it, this and that, and they only look at that single thing. It's you should step up and say, well, this improved revenue. However, it decreased some important metrics, so we should not launch it. And that is very important for PM to step up to do that. So as a result, in summary, I would say you need to find some metric you want to move up, at the same time, you should think of what are the things that definitely should not show up. And then usually that is what happened. And sometimes there's a non-critical metrics. When you move things up, it's moving down. Something is not that critical. That is more like judgment call. So, well, maybe this is a strategic decision that we make at this point in time. Let's say we want to, let's say, increase the number of users so that the average revenue per user kind of dropping a little bit, and that's okay because of our strategy to expand and then to tackle more market, get market share at the moment, which is okay. Those kind of critical decisions are usually made at the end, and then that's more like strategic kind of like thinking out of that. Another thing is sometimes when you see competing, metrics going different directions, you can think of a way to how to combine them together. For example, one time is like number of sales, another is number of the amount of average price, right? If it's number of sales going up, average price going down, then this is kind of like a competing metric, right? But what you can do is just make a multiply them together. Say the overall income is it going up or going down, right? For example, the ad spend, same thing, right? You have CTR going up and CPC going down, and then what you do is just take a look at the total revenue to see whether that makes sense or not.
So I want to again emphasize that point. Metric ultimately is a means to end. What we're really here to drive is product success, right? Hopefully as a product person. So metrics ultimately try to achieve your product goal in the end. So whatever the metric movement should reflect in your strategy, and it should be intentional. It should not be like, oh, I don't know why this particular metric moves and that metric could go up. The metric I care about go up, but other metrics go up. You should understand why. Like that's the first step. And then how that why connects to your final goal. So give you an example. Let's say, again, I think think about a new product you want to grow. And then you have a couple of strategies to grow. One, you just dramatically change the user base. You have other types of users, right? Think about Facebook back in the day. They first start with students, and then they expand to non-students, right? That is one way of growing their member base. But this has an implication, because when you introduce new people, yes, your number of users go up a lot. But will that actually change your ecosystem health and drive away the original group of people? How do you address their member experience? If you can make the existing students' experience still stay relatively unaffected with this new introduction of users, then you're successful, right? So at this time, let's say 2 p.m. 1 p.m. just say, let's just drive as many people as possible. I don't care about how this affects the rest of the ecosystem. So you will see the number of overall users go up. But if you look at a subset, looking at the number of existing users, their retention maybe become really, really bad. And that is a red alert, right? You could say, my strategy is just replacing the older folks with new folks. Then that's fine. That's intentional. That's okay. If you debate anything, that's the right strategy, that's okay. But if your strategy, as I described, is additional new user on top of students, we don't want to lose students, then this is a red alert. So as you can see, it can be totally the same two numbers, but if your intention is different, your strategy is different, in one case you will say that's fine, in other case you will say that's not fine. And another case is like, let's think about you try to increase price. Netflix recently increased price, but I will not use Netflix as an example. Let's say some sort of X company, where it's a subscription service. Try to raise money. We try to get more revenue, right? This could be two ways. One, we just say like, I just care about money, the overall number of money, right? It's a short-term thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to sell this company in 2 years. Right now, I want to sort of like get ready, so next year I can sell it. So I want to drive short-term revenue as much as I can, right? If you go that route, then you're intentionally knowing that you want to raise the price to get as much milk you can out of this space without caring too much whether they retain, especially if they retain a short period of time, but only 2 years later they will leave, then why would you care? Just do it, right? But your goal here is short-term success. Intentional, that's fine. But let's say you're a different CEO. You say, I treat this company as my lifelong project. I want to really build a great company. Then I always retain my members. I want them to have a very, very good, experience. And this CEO is not, I'm not saying they're not selfish. They may still want to get money. They're just in the long-term game. Like I want 10 years later, I still very profitable business. In that case, you will not sacrifice the short term to be like growth for the long term happiness, right? So if you just drive your price too high and want people leave, you will be very worried in this scenario. So again, two exact number, but depends on your intention, your strategy, your goal, you will have totally different decision. So I think that these two examples is enough to show you number is number. Number without intention is nothing. It's really about the intent, the strategy, the game you're playing, what you want to do. If you're clear about what you're playing, then all the metrics should reflect, if you design carefully, should reflect your intention. And then when they move, you should know very well why they move. And if they move in a way that is surprising, there's a few issues that could happen. A, your metric was not greatly designed. You didn't factor into certain issues in your design. That's why you couldn't capture the move, right? Another possibility is that your calculation strategy is wrong. You think that the member is going to behave a certain way, but they didn't. And so the metric didn't move the way you want them to move. In that case, you need to deep dive the user aspect. Do user interview, do query, sit down with whoever using your product, understand why. Without understanding why, you can't do trade-off, right? And the third case, let's say you see this is surprising, you understand why, but ultimately it is a call you have to make. Is it short-term versus long-term? And if you're clear about your exchange rate, like this is a phrase you're probably gonna hear a lot in this sort of scenario, you're willing to make a certain sacrifice for another greater goal, then clear about your exchange rate. If the current trade-off satisfy that exchange rate, go for it. So again, intent is most important. Then you use a metric to measure the intent so that when you see a number, you know what to do. It should not be emotional process. It's super rational. Once you lay out from the beginning, as you can see, it is becoming a mathematical problem.
Okay, thank you so much. So before we continue, I know Professor Dai, she's going to leave around 9 o'clock. So before she goes, why don't we take this opportunity for her to share some insights from a VC perspective on the metrics, anything she can share with the audience? Much appreciated.
So I came here, I thought I was gonna take a break and learn something new, and now I come here for work. So I think this has been a great talk, and I think all the panelists have been in the industry for a long time and have been providing great insight. So me asking to add something more, I really don't have much to say. I have now been a product manager for at least 6-7 years. So I think if you want to hear the latest and newest about the industry, and this is the place to be. But what I can talk about is in the last 5 years I have been a venture capitalist. So when we evaluate companies, sometimes it's data driven. Actually, we didn't really provide a specific metrics, but whenever there's new business proposal delivered to my inbox, the person we're looking at is really looking to how do we assess the potential market size, and what is the potential, is there good product market fit? Is there any metrics that we can look to have assessment of how likely the product can be engaged, how to say, so whether the product has a potential to grow into a very big market. That's particularly true for consumer market, right? So for example, I just take let's say take any kind of food delivery company, because some of us have a food delivery here. So let's say if a company that's running the food delivery business, and the first thing we ask is that how big is the food delivery market, right? So what do? Are they selling something directly? Do they have control of the supply chain, or they're purely delivered from the restaurant? If they're purely delivered from a restaurant, then we'll have to look into the unit economics, right? So how much do they make, what's the operation cost, but then you have to calculate into the marketing promotion cost as well. So the conclusion is if you're only a company that purely connect consumers and supermarket or restaurant, it's not likely to make money at this point. I don't understand how other company can make money in near term. But unless you have a large platform like Uber Eats, you can leverage some of the Uber drivers, then it does not make sense for startup to purely doing food delivery, and then you can outbeat all these large players. But that's just my point of view. You can point to me, 5 years from now, so this is a company make a lot of margin, but I don't see it. So consumer, the other good examples. So for example, the gaming as well, right? So you look into, let's say a gaming company that creates different games. Then you want to look into what are their growth of the users. So, and you want to see that how organic that growth is. So sometimes people only looking into how the user MAU, DAU increased dramatically. You don't look into how they acquire those users. You don't see that what percentage that through organic growth, and you don't look into, you measure the ones that already been touched. You haven't measured what are the possibilities. So if they're currently not yet very efficient, but they still have high percentage growth with organic growth rate and a high growth rate, then you can use your imagination that it could be much larger. Oh, is it pizza here? Sorry, I didn't call it a pizza. Anyways, sorry for the distraction. So I know some of you have not eaten yet. So particularly my students that didn't get anything to eat, and we have a long session. So I'm thinking about any 5-10 minutes, there will be 2 large pieces delivered, and then you guys all can share. 1 vegetarian and 1 meat. Okay. Yeah, so games. So go back to the questions. Okay, so then you can see the, whether they're very efficient of acquiring new customer, new users. Then you have to look into the engagement. But engagement data is not a steady number. So you want to see the engagement, whether it changed, whether they actually hit the top and start to recline. And typically that cycle is pretty quick for new games. And that we have to go back to look into why those users engaged. So I think all of you mentioned, right? So the not only just look at the numbers, what is really behind the numbers, what's inside of that. So you almost like a doctor, you look at all the symptoms and signals. You try to figure out what is the diagnosis and what is really caused it. Then you can figure out what potential treatment could be. So that's the question. Actually, I raised my hand, want to ask the panel earlier. Is that how do you know that you're wrong, right? So you have all these metrics out there, and then you monitor them. How do you know you actually are monitored the right metrics? You don't know what you don't know, right? So what are the metrics you're missing? And also you don't know whether the data collecting are right data, right? So how do you pick up the signals?
That's a really good question. That's why I think I want to emphasize again the tool nature of the metric, right? We don't serve like metrics. It's ultimately we're serving a goal, a strategy, and hopefully that is sort of a way to open different kinds of window or different paths to the end. So one way of knowing whether you're right or wrong is through metrics. But the other way is many other ways you can know whether you're wrong. For example, you can talk to your user, you can do interview, you can do survey, a lot of research aspect to know whether you're materially improving people's experience, right? Let's say you are, again, the new product analogy, because this represents a lot of things we do, whether it's a feature or product or new business. If at the end of the day, you talk to your user, you know you are not delivering what they want, but your metric look great, then that's problematic, right? And on the other hand, you could also think about this is kind of like the medical example, like a SAT, right? The metric is like the symptom. The symptom is actually tied to your theory about the body and what is going on. If you treat the symptom and the patient is not recovering but is dying, then you know you are wrong. So if you treat a product that way, it's the same. Let's say ultimately your metric is very actionable, so likely very short metric. But then a couple metric is likely to always tell the real story, like retention. And then retention is hard to get wrong. You basically just count how many of the users are going to stay with you after a certain period of time, right? That's the easiest measure you can measure. There should be no brainer to measure that. And if you see the retention day after day, like dropping from 60% to 50% to 40% to 30%, you know you're in big trouble. So it doesn't matter whatever other measure you come up with, and those measures look great. But the retention keep dropping, you know you have a problem.
Well, that's easy to do, right? So when you see a big problem that going extremely well, going extremely bad, but how do you know? I think the challenge is that how do you know that the product could be better? And if we talk about prediction, right? So if you can use a metric, come out with a prediction model to give you a guidance that what new feature could be, meet unmet need. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I think there's many ways. There's many ways that we can do that, right? I think
we have two moderators.
See how I trust my work back to you. Right?
Next time you can be a professor as well.
I always truly believe that ultimately as a product manager, we're serving a certain crowd of people. And these are crowd of people to talk. They can let you know what's going wrong, what's going right. And I often find that user research is a very excellent tool to surface concerns and issues. And sometimes this user not necessarily have to be far. It could be just your own employee using your own product. And if you use it frequently enough, you will discover the patterns of the issues that is not being met. I hope a lot of you have heard about the story, like Zhang Xiaolong, the founder, the main product lead of WeChat, right? Every day in the first few hours of his workday, he will just be playing WeChat. Why? Because he want to be very immersive with his own product and surfacing all the potential issues, trying to think like a person, like a user, right? And I highly encourage all of yourself, like you should be the best user, the most advanced user of your own product, and know all the problem, all the corner cases. You have to be. And on the other hand, you can say your team, your own company's employee, like Google has this very famous dog fooding culture. You have enough employee to play with your product, and then all those people are diverse, they have different needs. They hopefully can help you surface other issues or opportunities. But then you also have your user researchers who can help you survey larger amount of people, or even bring people into the office that can tell you stories and issues. And then this is like social media. Sometimes if your user base is large enough, voluntarily, without you even soliciting, they're gonna complain about you on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere. So you just need to listen sometimes. At the startup, it's much harder because your user base is so small, but it's also somewhat much easier because you only have so many users. You can even be friends with them. And a lot of famous products grow like that. Like Instagram in the old days, the founders know their early users. They take pictures together. They will organize meetups. So Instagram in some way in the beginning is like part of pub. You don't know, maybe it will become Instagram. It goes together with your user base. And then a lot of those Instagram stars were like really good friends with the founders. So they know exactly what's going on with the product and what are the unmet needs. They have a particular very good sort of tap into the community. If you lose that and you only look at metrics, it's just like a Chinese story where it's kind of like 纸上谈兵, right? You just basically playing the game on the paper, and the paper can be wrong.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I was just going to ask you because you talk about numbers, and I said, okay, what about Steve Jobs? Never listened, right, to customers or anybody.
He's his own user, right? Like I think sometimes a very successful founder, they are their own first user. They know what they want, and they bullish enough. They know this is going to be projected to other types of users, they see the commonality and they play that bet. A lot of times you fail if you play that game. A lot of time you also succeed. Like Dropbox in the early days are like that too. The guy, Drew, he just built this thing for himself. He didn't even do any interview for other users. He just believed there must be that need. So he built it fully and take it to, Y Combinator. And Paul Graham, more strategic kind of venture capitalist, he sees more, right, of the product. He's like, yes, this is the company. I validate you, I'll give you money, go for it, right? So then he becomes successful.
Yeah, so I think back to the question. So I think Steve Jobs is definitely like one type of product designer where he just understands the fundamental human needs, and so like that's where he came up with the product design. And there are another type of like product designers where they just based on a lot of metrics, based on a lot of analysis, and trying to make the right decision. So there's like two stereotypes where you can play. And I think Steve Jobs is definitely the stereotype for understanding the human needs without even looking at the data. So back to the data question. So as a startup, as a startup founder, like usually we don't have researchers and just like all those insights with you. And sometimes like you don't have the lot of user data and stuff like that. So what I found is very practical is trying to like even you see like some numbers going up or some metrics going up really well, but still dive down into the details and trying to say like trying to understand the fundamental of why that metric is going up. I can give you one example is that when we want to drive the in-app purchase, and so we have different price model. We have like 5 different price model. So one is like $1, and the other is $3, and the other is $9, and the other is like $39. And so the metric that we defined is, of course, the revenue, like whether you increase the revenue. So the metrics that we choose is of course the revenue, like the total number of the revenue driven by this in-app purchase. And after 1 month, and after like we carry on release, and we do find the in-app purchase increase and number increase. So we're really happy. But I'm just curious, like why we increase? Does it really it comes from like when we increase a lot of US and improve a lot of US and that stuff. It does. But once we dive down into different segments, and we found like a lot of revenues comes from returning users. So the in-app purchase is a subscription model. So which means that they already purchased the product and they subscribe and they upgrade it into a higher price model. But for the new users, for the new user segments, when we analyze the funnels and we found like conversion doesn't improve at all. So just by looking at the total number of the revenues doesn't help with diving into the details. But diving into different segments and trying to do a full set of like assessments will help to understand like where does this improve really comes from, and because having the revenue improve from the return user doesn't help us with long term. What we want is that we want to drive the new users revenue, but without even dive down into the details. I don't understand, like I couldn't get those information. So I think that's the common practice that I would suggest every PM do.
Well, I think that's very true. So as early stage VC, if any founder tell me that they got all this metrics figured out, that's totally BS. Not possible. A lot of times you just don't know what's going on. I remember when I was head of Yahoo search in China, and every week Monday, then we have a team meeting every PM. Have the search in each individual market in Asia Pacific, and we'll go over 80 metrics. You guys can feel free to grab the food if you want to. So, and then obviously, if you have 80-ish number to look, they're all different metrics, right? sessions, click-through rate, each search result, next page, bounce rate, all different things. And then you just look at the numbers, like what's going on, what's going up and down. And most of the time we have no clue. I remember there's a specific country PM, he's pretty funny. Every time I ask, so why did it increase? It's a seasonal. It's a decrease. It's a seasonal. And then sometimes you just really don't have any clue. So go back to, there are two different kinds you talk about. Intuitional, right? So you base on what could be, what likely could be. You can be right or wrong. And the other one's evidence-based. So you actually have the metrics come in. So for example, we see the one of the, I would say, the new product idea that my team did a while back. This was 2002. So my team built the first image search in China, first music search in China, first knowledge search in China. At the time, it was still pretty much a Yahoo direct search, web search. The reason that we built the 3 vertical search is because we're looking to the first 1,500 keywords on a daily basis. And then what we noticed that they are name of the songs, name of the celebrity, name of basically it's all those famous people. And then what they do, they click into the website and then they look at the picture or they listen to the song. And then why don't you just make one stop? If all the top keywords are all related to that, what can you just make it easier? So that's the indicator to tell you that what could be a potential need. And currently it's not efficient to get there. But a lot of times it just, you don't know, right? So you have some idea, particularly for startup, that you have an idea and you want to validate that. For consumer market I think that it's not a bad idea to start and trial, particularly now we talk about the concept of MVP, minimum viable product, but that also being abused in my opinion, right? So it should not be an excuse that to build some half-assed product out and see what's going on, because everything comes with a cost. You lose the resources you build in the product, you lose the time you use the market opportunity as someone else with the right product. So it's all going to need to be considered as a cost of error, trial and error.
It's all means to the ends, I think. Yeah. Like ultimately, product managers are like scientists or detectives. Like that's how I envision myself. That's why I think it's cool. Like really, you try to understand some certain phenomena, right? And then you try to manipulate that phenomena to something that you want. And so all these metrics or other, user research and survey are just data points. It's evidence, the traces of the phenomena you're trying to observe and understand. And hopefully that maps to your understanding of it and also maps to your strategy of manipulating it. And if you can achieve that, then really a lot of the metric design or analysis is like a differentiation, like investigation. You have a hypothesis. You're always a hypothesis driven, right? Your hypothesis could be, I do this A, then people will move like B. And if that's the case, we should be able to measure the movement B in terms of a certain number. And if the number goes up, then your hypothesis should be right. So if we think of that way, really the metric game is an investigation game, it is a detective game, it is a scientific research game. It should be hypothesis driven, it should be rigorous, should be somewhat kind of like you can see the evidence that help support your intuition. So I do agree there's 2 types, but I really think for a great product manager, you should be able to play both games. You should have a great intuition because you'll know enough about humanity, about what they usually behave. So you have a decent hypothesis, you do certain thing, they will move a certain way, right? Or they move a certain way, you understand why. But then you shouldn't be so bullish on your intuition, you always want to validate with evidence. If you can play both games, then you're unstoppable.
Yeah, so I could not emphasize enough to my students that I think to be a good product manager, psychology is necessary. I just need to learn the consumer psychology.
Read a lot of books, I would say, like in all kinds of genres. Psychology is definitely one, and then read a lot of biography, read detective stories, read in general stories, novels. Actually, writers are really good detectives too because they understand humanity. That's why they write a fictional like character in a way that almost like relatable, like a real life setting, right? A bad writer will give you some superficial setting that just doesn't make sense, right? Good writer will bring you in and think, yeah, that makes sense. If I were in that situation, I would have moved it this way. That means he knows about it. He knows about the humanity.
Yeah. I want to add one more thing. Sorry for taking.
We were kind of
this,
generalize the topic.
Got a few words before I leave. What I want to say is that even though today here we talk about metrics, we talk about product, it sounds like it's all for product managers, but it's way beyond that. I think it should not only apply to product managers, but with anybody who works with product, anybody who wants to build a company, or in general, if you think about yourself, you are a product, right? So how do you, what is our product market fit? And if you want to build a company, what's the product market fit? And how do you design your future, right? So you have to look into what is the pain point, right? So, and what's the capability and how do you measure yourself? Everything's connected. So I heard people saying that, product manager is the CEO of your product, but in a way, it's the product thinking and product mind is most important thing. It will go with you for not just this position, but transfer for different positions. So, for example, I have three roles. Let's talk about main two. One is a professor at CMU. So how do I design the product courses? How do I design different courses? I'm looking away as I design product features. How do I iterate the product? So each year my students have they don't have exact the same use cases. 75% use cases are changed to adapt to the current market case. We have different speakers come to the class, by the way. Product Hub is going to be there next week to speak. And we have, how do we position ourselves? How do we present CMU different from Stanford and Berkeley, right? So that's, even though it's a teaching job, then if you use product design thinking, then you can design something different. VC, we'll go back to how does the VC firms differentiate from each other? How do we compete with Sequoia, Benchmark? That's another product market fit and a product positioning, right? We have to track our metrics, the returns, internal returns, cash distribution, all those are metric driven everywhere. So when a startup tell me the addressable market, for example, go back to the delivery business, right? So hypothetically, we take We as an example. We is an Asian grocery delivery app. So then the first thing crossed my mind is, okay, how many Asians in the United States? 20 million. How many Chinese? 5 million. If you expand to Canada, how many Chinese? 1 million. How many Asian? 5 million. What's the market penetration? So what's the market penetration right now? 20%? 10%? Do you think you can expand? Do you think they reach potential? And then you find a number, you get to the addressable market. So that's the top down. And then you have to bottom up to see how much they have generated the revenue, whether their success in Bay Area can be replicated in Seattle, LA, Vancouver, and what are the main factors which impact those models. You can do city by city model. And then you look into operation costs, inventory turnover, you look at delivery fee, you look into all different other elements to see that whether it's really makes sense and sustainable, right? It's all number game in a way. So today you look at the metrics of retention, engagement, all the different things still apply if you do other things. So going back to my point is that I think learning about the skills of designing a product, find pain point, find product market fit, measure, analyze, optimize, and that's a skill applied to all different kind of positions. So I hope you enjoy the sessions.
Thank you so much.
Only skill on product has the tendency to become motivation. Workshop.
Yeah, I have to take off right now, so thank you so much. Please continue.
Thank you so much, Liz. I just feel like I didn't give enough introduction to Lake for the people who don't know about Lake. So besides her role as a professor in CMU in product management, she was also like an early member of Yahoo that she mentioned, like leading the Yahoo search. She also was the number 1864 employee at Alibaba. She was leading. She was early employee at Apple China as well. And now like she's turning to become a VC. So a lot of roles, very experienced. So thanks again for Lake to be here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, so can I do my commercial? So commercial for CMU. So CMU Silicon Valley campus, and I think you can see that actually we have probably 25% attendees are CMU students from software management and technology ventures. Great programs, great faculty, and great teams. So if you want to do part-time, consider that. If you want to do full-time, we have 1 year full-time. Okay. And then the other thing is I'm also on the board of a nonprofit organization called Women in Tech National. It's a nonprofit built in the 80s. So it's a global organization to empower women to take leadership positions in technology. So we have every June we'll have an annual conference. People from all over the world are going to be there. It's like 2,000, 3,000 people. So if your organization is interested in something like that, just let me know. Okay, commercial stuff.
Okay, so we want to save time for the Q&A session. Just one more question. So last question. So we talked about having conflicting metrics, right, going up and down. But when we have politics in the game, right, in the play. So let's say, for example, I'm working on my ads. I want to reach out to a broader audience. I want to reach out to more people, but I'm gonna damage conversion. That's my intention. I know that's gonna happen. But what if the conversion is a success metric on Joel's team or Chen's team, right? So there's gonna be a conflict of interest between the two teams, especially at a bigger company like Netflix. Maybe not Netflix, but Google or Facebook, because Netflix people have the same metrics. But when you have different metrics, what would you do, right? So when you have politics, do you have any insights to share?
Yeah, I have a lot of stories because I also worked in other companies that, yes, different product organs can have their own KPI, or metrics that they have to drive. And especially in company, let's say, actually it's just one product. Like think about Facebook, actually it's just one product. It just has many different sub flavors of that product, right? So in some way, each team can drive a certain aspect of engagement of that app. And then in that situation, you can have a lot more conflict, a lot more tension between different teams who try to drive that particular aspect of engagement. So one example I can give you, Facebook has a lot of tabs, right? You noticed each product team probably driving a certain tab, and I used to be responsible for one tab. And then so who gets to be on that first sort of like a loading place is a huge prize, right? If you get that, you got tons of traffic. Period. And then even all metric is all about, like, let's say daily active for that tab. How we argue for that positioning is a very controversial piece. In that sort of scenario, to be honest, it's harder for just a 2 p.m. to get a resolution because by its nature, it's very conflicting. It usually requires 2 ways to like resolve the conflict. One, it has to be the person who benefits on both products. So usually the VP for that product area, or like, if it is a 2 product org, it has to be someone like Zach. Actually make a call and think that from the perspective of the whole company, which one is more important to put in. That's one way. The other way you can also say, oh, there's too many tabs now. It's harder to figure out which tab is better for the member. So this is the member perspective. If we think about from the member perspective, maybe you like, let's say, the video tab more, when I like the marketplace tab more. Then you and my experience should be different. So that algorithm come to rescue. So that is actually what Facebook eventually chose to do. Roughly, I think it was 2 years ago, because it was a responsible area for one of the people who report to me. She drives the first version of ranking tabs. And then once you rank it, then it can be the first 5 tabs are all different for different people. So that's another way to solve it using the algorithm. There's potentially a third way, but this third way is in a different set of conflicts. So it's not like, okay, you have the same metric, but you have to compete for the product importance. It could be you have different metrics, but you're on the same surface. Let's say it's all feed, like Instagram feed, right? On that feed might be different teams working on different components. Some people say I'm responsible for the ads. Some people say I'm responsible for the feed engagement. I think that was your initial to the example. There could also be feed itself. Can we say I'm responsible for driving the time spread? And the other team say I'm responsible for spamming. Like I'm responsible for decrease the spam. I need to be responsible for the feed integrity. Then you can see they all have different metrics. And many times these 3 areas may just have a conflict with each other. You can imagine, let's say I just drive time span. Maybe I put a lot of nudity photos on Instagram. The time span go up a lot, but your integrity gonna tank like to the bottom, right? And then in that case, you need somewhat kind of like a measurement of overall member experience. So usually like a member retention, or maybe it could be just intuitively, you may have an exchange rate that you can solve that. So in this case, you find a common metric you all care about. That common metric is not a common metric. It's not the metric you're responsible for, but it's the metric that Joe mentioned earlier, like you shouldn't tank. So if you all agree upon that metric you shouldn't tank, that can also resolve the conflict, right? But in the ads versus feed scenario, you kind of dependent on each other, right? On one hand, you cannot tank the time span to the 0, then your ads will be 0. But on the other hand, if you just optimize only for time span, then the ads revenue doesn't go. So in that way, it's kind of like a classic problem in algorithm. You kind of like a 2-parameter optimization problem. You could find actually a particular point that is balanced for both to optimize the most. And overall, the interests are optimized the most. So in this way, it's like a multi-objective optimization. So that's another way to solve the problem. You find that you're multi-objective, you figure out a way to optimize it. So I've seen all these 3 different scenarios.
Okay, now I'll skip. I think I will leave more time for the audience.
Anything to add?
Well, as a startup, we have like basically every scenario goes up to me. Like, I know what to make
You
a
decide,
decision. Yeah. So yeah. So again, like I think it's boiled down to the fundamental question, like who can drive the revenue up. So for example, like we're also running the ads on the feed, but how do you like basically prioritize the feed versus prioritize the like organic feeds and versus the ads is kind of like martial arts. You're looking for the local optimize the points where you can reach both like retention high as well as the revenue high. So I would say like it's basically determined by the high level like combination, and whenever like different teams have different kind of metrics to measure, if they're conflict with each other, just ask them 2 questions where like which one is something that will drive the company goal. So after you have that, you basically solve the problems for a startup, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for the panelists. A really, really great conversation. So before we open the session to the Q&A, let me emphasize that we do envision to do a hands-on workshop in 2 weeks. So it's not going to be open for public because we want people to be aware of the context, right? The stuff that we talked about today, so we can dive deeper into the hands-on workshop in 2 weeks. So if you are interested, come to me after the session. So let me register you, and then we can start from there. So
Both
that,
online and offline.
Yeah, probably we'll send up some sort of invitation through email or other chat, right? Because we have people online that they couldn't talk to.
okay, sure, yeah. we'll
And
send out
some people leave earlier, so they may not hear that.
Sure. Okay. So now it's open for Q&A session. Any questions from the audience?
I think just now we had a question about pros and cons. And like Chen, you mentioned the exchange rate. I would like to know more about like what is a common exchange rate, or like what are some of the like,
Yeah. So exchange rate is really just about the trade-off that we can measure. Yeah. Yeah. And then this cannot be measured if we don't run experiments. So it's usually rooted in a bunch of experiments. So let's say, I'm just saying a very hypothetical scenario. Let's say initially you all care about all types of content. Let's use the marketplace as an example, a content marketplace, right? You want to drive just in general time step and make it better. So that's easy life. But one day you say, we actually want to insert ads now. And some of the ads may not really drive as much engagement as your previous organic one, right? So now you need to figure out, okay, how much I can insert this ads? It's like insertion rate that makes sense. So you may start running some experiment. Let's say I insert every 5 slots, or insert every 10 slots, or insert every 15 slots. You're gonna measure, you're gonna see some of your key metric is gonna drop, like the core metric, the time spent gonna drop a little bit. But meanwhile, your revenue goes up. So once you run enough experiment, you can start calculate how much percentage drop in the time span can give me how much percentage increase in the revenue. And then this is a judgment call. It's hopefully you can take the result to the person who is the informed captain. Could be the CEO, could be the person who overview both area. That person needs to make a decision. Say, I'm willing to take 1% of every 1% time spent for every 25% increase in revenue. And they're gonna decide that. Then that's become the golden rule of exchange rate that you operate on. Then the future test, that's much easier to decide. Right now, you do a test if you see like 2% of the streaming, time spent job, but you only have 0.1% increase in the revenue. You will say no, that's too much cost. But let's say if you drop 1% of time spent, but I drive 2% of revenue, get golden star because you beat the exchange rate, right? So imagine that's the scenario for many different product contexts. So you can see A and B, that is a trade-off. You measure the trade-off in terms of exchange rate, then all your future tests can base on that baseline and then challenge it. And of course, the baseline can be adjusted day by day, right? Like today, as a product leader, I may say, this is exchange rate because that's how much we can do. But later on, when we innovate everything, we realize, hey, actually can do twice of better efficiency than this. Then I will update the goal for the whole team and not beat that goal with that bad baseline, right? So that's how eventually you get this kind of like balance. A lot of like attention model, I think earlier Shirley was talking about, and other sort of business model all has this internal exchange rate.
I'm wondering if you have any experience for like pretty early stage 2B product and how you define the metrics. Is there any general guideline? Is it similar to a 2C business? And also, how do you relate your success metrics and your client success metrics? Because they're probably having some industry standard metrics that they use, but it's not necessarily how you measure that. But you also wanted to relate to that because they're making decisions based on that. So how do you?
I think also you can chime in on this. We definitely have client aspect.
So to us, like one of our business model is that we sell the partners brand, we sell the partners products through our platform. So one way we do is that we do recruit, we do talk to different partners and different brands and try to recruit them into our platform. So I know what they're looking for is basically conversion rate. So high conversion rate through our platform compared to the other kind of ads, Google ads or the other like Pinterest or Facebook ads. So the conversion rate is definitely their North Star metrics, but sometimes it can be changed. For example, for some of the early brands, some very new brands such as Ruggable, like this is new kind of brands, and they're trying to open their market. They're trying to do the branding. So for those type of brands, and they're looking for a new segments of audience that they can touch. and not fundamentally to be the conversion rate. They may not looking for the conversion rate high conversion rate, but they're looking for like how many people that you can influence with, and the segments of the like the demographics of that type of users. So trying to figure out like your targeting audiences, such as like which brands are what is their goal, and then at the early stage, I think what we usually do to try to get the partnership going on is to promise what they want. So and to set our metrics as their metrics, because as it's kind of like win-win. If you want them to continue working with you, you definitely need to working on their metrics. So and of course, like when you grow, you have like more than 100 partners, 100 brands, and you definitely cannot do the customized and customized stuff. You need to have a general like general metrics. So for us, we were at the early stage right now. So when we talk to different brands, and we just like set we're just trying to figure out what is their success metrics, and we're setting our metrics at their metrics.
So in a perfect world, is what you sell to your customer is what they want, or what they actually sell, or what they are profit from. And sometimes it's not getting there because of the growth of the industry, but eventually we'll get there. So one example would be like 10 or 15 years ago, right, in the online advertising industry. And usually what you sell is traffic to your customer website. You have ads out there, click on this, and then people go to their website. And each time you charge them by one click, right? But that is actually not what they want, because they don't want people to go to the website. They want to actually, convert to be their customer, right? So as the industry grows and the industry become more mature, then the overall industry moving towards from a click-based to conversion-based. And then later on become all kinds of conversion, different customer, different conversion types. Some of them say, well, my goal is to lead people to my website and make a purchase on my website, such as e-commerce site, right? And then you have to make your product, your advertising product optimized for getting more end online purchase. Some customers are like a local business, such as like a restaurant. Then for them, their goal is to drive more store visits or visits or foot traffic to the website. In your store. It's not about like going to the website. But then you should also have a way to do advertising to actually drive to actually go to their website, right? Some of them are more like lead-based customer. So we don't have online purchase, but you can call us, and we have sales team to convert their those leads, right? And then you should also optimize your advertising offering to give them calls or other type of leads, right? So as the industry mature, more and more mature, and then the advertising industry move more and more to satisfy all kinds of variety of questions that the end customer needs. I think that's kind of example. I believe that is also happening in other industries as well. So at the beginning, maybe you are selling what you want to sell, but later on, you have to sell what your customer wants. And eventually, when the customer wants become very complicated, and you have to provide different offerings to meet the demand of all different customers.
Is there any online question?
Online is pretty quiet today.
Hi, do you have any thoughts or advice on when the product is like an internal product and where the visibility of the tool or the product you're making is very limited, let's say? Maybe you can measure something like, the old tool, and it takes less time to perform certain tasks. But in addition to that, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think it comes back to why you build that product. Hopefully, I always say the metric is matching your strategy, right? So if you build an internal product, hopefully you have a pretty clear internal need that you try to satisfy. For example, my first product I worked ever as a product manager. At the time, I don't even have the title, but I was working on it as a PM capacity, is to help our financial planning team automate their pipeline. That was the problem statement, because they basically took too much time to process certain budgeting. So I try to figure out how much time they spend right now, and then we build this tool. We help them automate. Then there's two metrics naturally, right? Because I want to service need. One is how much time I save, and second is how much percentage of their work process I automate. And in the end, I know the number. I actually put it in my resume on LinkedIn. Like we automated roughly 85% of their process, and that got us actually award from the CFO because that is the metric he's looking at. And all this thing, hopefully you do before you start working. Yeah? Usually you should set your goal, your strategy, and your measurement of your strategy and goal, and then match the number. And then when you're working on your product, then you can see how this metric eventually turn out. And then if everything designed, nicely, then your outcome should match your intent. And if it doesn't match, then this is where you can improve it and optimize for. So I think the same logic applies for internal tool. And sometimes it's actually easier to come up with a metric for internal tool. Because first of all, your clients are there, you can talk to them. You can get so many details regarding what you are working on, right? And with those details, you can actually design much better metric. And you can get that data too to help. Like imagine if I'm doing this for external client, they may not want to share with me all the detail of their workflow. They may just tell me so much so I can build the product, but I can't measure their time. They may think that that's too sensitive to share. Then I can't even have that metric. So I feel actually internal tools are relatively easier to measure if you want to.
Yeah, and also I think one of the challenge for people think about internal tool is that usually you think about internal tools impact kind of small. If you look at the absolute number, if you build something that for the outside consumer, right, you can say, oh, I have 1 million active users, right? And if you build something for internal that I have 100 users, right, or something like that, and it seems that pretty low, right? So then let's go back to the question earlier, right? Any number does not make any sense if you do not make a comparison, right? Then you can see, well, this tool, yeah, it's if you look at absolute number is low. However, comparing it with the last version, their speed is up by 80%, right? Comparing with the other tool is better than the 20%, right? In terms of coverage, it's covered 80% of use cases. In terms of daily active user, 99% of our company's employees are using it every single day. Right? If you think about the comparison, then you go see a nicer picture.
I totally agree with that. And then especially internal to a lot of time is cost saving. And there's always this part of decision, do I buy a piece of software to serve that goal or I have an internal team build it? So you need to know your reporting chain up about how they look at your area, right? They're likely comparing your work versus a piece of solution they can purchase. And that is really just $1 comparison. So you can prove to them by building this team with all the investment on the operational side, still cheaper than buying that piece of software, and you win. And a very good example about internal tool, I would think about all infrastructure platform work is the internal, right? And how do they put their impact? A lot of this time is the cost. But sometimes it's also an aspect of winning. For example, if the infrastructure does well, you can enable new use cases because the productivity or the bandwidth you save can be freed up for other things. Then you can also tie your metric to a revenue metric, which is awesome.
Oh, this is actually very good. So infrastructure is a very interesting thing because it's actually eye-opening when I see how people measure infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes they measure infrastructure by the impact of their customers. So they say, because my infrastructure, my customers, for people who already use their infrastructure, can make XXX million US dollars. So that's smart.
Exactly, that's the mindset.
Yeah.
So there is another metric that you can add into the picture, which is the scalability. So for example, like if you build an internal platform or internal product, can help the team A to scale their product or to scale their user base into being like million 10x or 100x. I think that's another kind of successful metrics that you can kind of state.
I think the lady over there raised her hand many times. Maybe next. Yeah.
So earlier we discussed about A/B testing when validating and measuring the metrics, and you brought up an example saying about the sign-up page, I guess. So I understand that every decision and every test comes at a cost, and especially you're testing a sign-up page. This is a very critical page, and when you're a startup company, and so I'd like to know your take on this. Did you do it on a laboratory to environment, or did you do it on production? And what's the scale and your plan? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think the time that we do so as a startup, really you don't have like enough tools, and you don't have enough resources to build tools for you. For example, for us, we don't have data scientists, and so as a founder, like I just go to different platforms and grab data and analyze by myself, and by writing different tons of like Python script and trying to do that. By doing the A/B testing, I think there are a lot of tools that you can leverage when simply Firebase. So I don't know if you guys know Firebase, but we're using Firebase a lot to do the A/B testing. It's a great tool. We use different tools before, and then so by comparison, I think the Firebase is more reliable. So that's why we're using Firebase. And so when we do the A/B testing, you just set a baseline and you set different variable groups. So the baseline is because we don't know whether we bring the SAP patient to the front is going to bring us is going to improve the SAP rate as well as maintain the daily active users. Daily active users meaning that they spend at least 30 seconds or 1 minute in our app. So like you set the baseline to be like 50% of your daily users, and the other 50% is actually the group A, which is you bring the SAP rate into the front. So compared to the two groups, and you're setting the SAP rate as your testing metrics. So after certain times, like after 3 days, we just know there is a significant differences between two groups. And of course, like you need to run for a long time in order to basically stabilize results. And that's how we did the A/B testing.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for the shout out. I'm just wondering, not sure how applicable this is for everyone else, but I'm a product designer and also do research as well. Just wondering, like, what are things that researchers or designers can do to make your life as a PM easier, like bigger things or smaller things?
I think one thing.
Wow, I'm so touched by this question. You're the other way around.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to tie back to today's theme. You know, because all of you are into the metrics. I think I have met some of the designers that have metric-driven thinking, which I think is very good. I think it's not very common for designers, because but one designer have that kind of thinking, because let me put it this way. Oftentimes, you know, when there's like argument or kind of different opinion, oftentimes what designers say, well, from user's perspective, this is more user friendly. You know, in many companies, it doesn't work. You know, I met some of the designers. They can say, oh, I can prove it with number. Let me give you this. You know, I think this can be measured by this metric. Let's take a look at that. And then he won the argument, because I think he was using the kind of the useful weapon, even though maybe he was thinking of, you know, it's actually more user friendly, but he didn't say that. He was saying, what kind of metric can we, you know, measure, and take them, and he won the argument. So I think if designer have more this like metric driven mindset, would be actually very helpful. Yeah, and I felt helpful for designers themselves.
Yeah, I think there's a several aspects in your question. As a product researcher, I often find really good sort of insights from my researcher partner, and they will help me generate a lot of hypotheses that I want to test, and then or certain strategy may be surfaced from them because they're so close to their users. And then sometimes they're also very good thinking partner that help me figure out how we design a particular survey or research or user study so that we can get that information from user regarding a certain product, right? Maybe like I'm literally just clueless and don't know why they do certain things. Then I would just go to my user researchers and like, hey, can we design a survey or just bring some user, right? Let's ask them. And usually a good user researcher will help me understand how you ask questions is really important, right? You don't want to ask questions that are leading to like soliciting a certain aspect. You want it to be very like fair. You want it to be a dialogue. You want people to actually talk about what they do and think. You don't want to be biased. So all of this is like expertise on the user research side that you can bring. I remember a lot of the partners I worked with are psychology or sociology, so like PhDs like that. So they're very well versed in terms of how they can make a measurement without perturbing the study object. And then that is actually really a scientific approach, needs years of training to get to. One quick concrete example, right? I learned from a recent conversation with a psychologist. They told me like when you design survey, you always have to put in a question. This question is a very simple question to answer if the user is paying attention. So for example, you will say, oh, what is the capital of US? And then you'll look, so for like answer B is Washington, DC. Why do you need that such a like a, sort of dummy question? Is because a lot of people, they may just try to fill the survey quickly so they can get the money. They may just A, or D. So the people who answer wrong for that basic question, you can just discard their example. Like, to me, that's eye-opening. I never thought about that. None of my our survey ever have this. Now I was like, okay, I need to tell me about now. When we design our user survey, we just add yeah, what's our name? And then you say, a lot of people they say, Product Hub, I'm going to discard your deal. So that's what I spent. And on the designer side, I think the designer is really well versed with intuition and the user behavior. And then see tons of patterns of interaction. This is something as a product manager, I'm not well versed at. So when my designer partner bringing lots of this solution, I view this as an opportunity to like diverge my solution set. And then I can work with him or her to figure out what is the narrowed set based on the condition that I apply. So I think both are like a very strong point about the designer and the researcher that can contribute. I still say I agree with the metric perspective. If the designer or researcher even metric driven, wow, that's a heaven.
I've been working with different designers and so far, so I think the good designers are the ones that when they presented the designs to you, to me, and they just say, hey, this is the design that I designed, and what is the reason that I came up with this design? So usually they probably did a lot of iterations before, a lot of designs and solutions before, but they came up with this conclusion where this design I think is the best. Sometimes they came up with decisions by supporting by metrics. Sometimes it's just by intuition, but at least you tell me like what is why you came up with this design. And so if I dive down into saying, hey, did you think about this user scenarios or this user cases? And they've been thinking, yes, I did thought about that before, and this is why I came up with the design, and comparing those because of why they so he decided between like those designs and came up with the final decision. So I think the good designers have the rationales behind the design is very important. Sometimes it's just data driven, sometimes it's just intuition, but you need to understand why you came up with that good design. So we currently don't have a researcher. So if I could have a researcher, that'd be great. So it's kind of like advertisement here. Yeah, so if any of the good researchers want to join a really quick, good promising startup, just come to me, and then yeah, we'll get started on that.
Okay, so we have time for one last question. Feel free to talk to the panelists afterwards.
So I have a question for Chenjie. So you shared earlier that how different companies define different metrics for different teams. As an example, Facebook will have different metrics for different teams for different product lines, whereas for Netflix, they will have a unified primary metrics for all of the teams, organization-wise. I'm just curious to learn about, from your internal perspective, about why these companies make such decisions that obviously should be the most beneficial for them at that point of time.
I think it's a bit related to the product itself and a bit related to the culture. So I will talk about both aspects. First of all, Facebook, although it's one app, you can see the use cases they serve is quite diverse, right? Because Facebook, it's kind of like Google, it kind of serves everyone's needs, but everyone is different. So ultimately, they will build a different experience for a certain group of people, and then that make the whole app a really like a multi-app app, right? For some of the user, I know to them, Facebook equal internet. That's how diverse the experience is, right? Netflix, on the other hand, is very simple, very focused. It's all about streaming, right? People come to Netflix, don't do anything else. They're not coming to connect with someone or trying to find a piece of garment to buy. They come here to watch videos. So in some ways, it's a super simplified product, right? So given that, like, we don't need to come up with a variety of measures to measure success. To us, what mostly important is retain the user so they can keep paying us, right? And if I want to retain the user, the most important thing is they stream. If they stream a lot of videos, there's no spam, but all content is, produced high quality. There's no sort of like dynamics of marketplace I need to worry about, right? If they stream, generally speaking, their member experience is really good. So that part is the difference to determine the metric and complexity. On the other side, I think I somewhat suspect that culture is related to the product. So it's not completely independent dimension, but there is some sort of like reflection of the founder's mindset as well. I think Zach is more like a hacker sort of mindset, engineer mindset. So everything needs to be measurable, because once you put a number behind it, you can optimize it for it, right? In some way, you can view all the product work like a machine. It's like a machine learning. If you determine an objective, I can figure out algorithm, optimize it for that objective. So in that sort of way, you want all your product units work like that, like individual machines. And then the goal, I give you a specific goal, and I give you a specific metric you have to get to over this period of time. Now, achieve that. And this works beautifully, beautifully. I think Facebook is one of the most efficient companies I have seen. On the other hand, because Netflix is all about this one kind of member experience. So all the different product units, although we work on different aspects of the product experience, ultimately we want to drive only one metric, right? We drive one kind of, a type of the experience. So we can just based on each individual metric and not consolidate, not kind of like a reconsole. So we have this format called product strat, which I can openly talk about. This is how we make decisions. We will have one informed captain representing their product area, presenting sort of proposal or certain test results. But then we have literally a round room. It's like everyone's sit in circles in like 3 layers, all like a little theater. And I love how we mirror our own experience very closely. And then everyone can come as long as you read the memo, read the proposal. If you feel something you can contribute, doesn't matter who you are. It could be someone working on content and not related to our goal. But if you have something you can say to my area, you are invited and you can come. And then people will give me a variety of feedback as the info captain, the product manager usually, will make a final call. So you can see this way, if everyone can come, then we need to have a unified set of decision-making criteria, right? It shouldn't require a lot of context. Otherwise, me from a different org, I have no idea about what this like set of metrics is. How can I go and debate with them, right? So at Facebook, there's no product strat like that. It's more like within own little product group, they have their own decision making. But if I work on ads, you work on feed. The ads people usually don't appear at the feed sort of decision making session. But for Netflix, we often see cross-team presence from other areas. So I think culture and the product specifically decide kind of like how the metrics are sent around.
So even though I'm not from those two companies, but I can add more from the business point. So I think even though they're all playing the attention game, so but they measure, but they have different business models. So I think Facebook is more like is kind of ads revenue driven company. So the more time that user spending in the platform is more is driving more revenues for them. I think the Netflix's business model is that by subscriptions. So the more user retention that they get, and the more user bases that they get, they drive more revenues. So even though they're like all or pay attention to the people's time that's spending in the app, but they are actually different business models, and so their North Star metrics is really different.
Okay, thank you so much. So thanks to our panelists, and also thanks to the audience. You didn't go to a movie theater, but to come to us for the night. So definitely I'll look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks to do the hands-on workshop.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're gonna take a group picture. So if you guys can come up, like we can take a picture with our speakers together. Thanks.
Okay, for the people online, we're going to close the call. Thank you for everyone.